Hello? I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Historic Preservation Commission for June 24th, 2020. Are we in a compliance with the open meeting law?
Yes, we are.
Public comment. Comment during this portion of the agenda may be limited to matters on the agenda for action. If you wish to be heard, come forward and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Chair. This is Gabby in the clerk's office. May I please call roll?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Chair White?
Here.
Chair Stodel? Vice Chair Stodel? Commissioner Levine? Commissioner Beck? Here. Commissioner Hotchkiss? Commissioner Hotchkiss, can you hear me?
Yes, here on the phone.
Okay, we have him on the phone. Commissioner Serfas?
Inside.
Commissioner Cosgrove?
Here.
Commissioner Laramie?
Here.
Commissioner Palancar?
Here.
Commissioner Seabrandt?
Here.
Thank you, and Commissioner Levine is here. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I might, just real quick, for everyone, because I know this is your first meeting in chambers, if you could remember to hit the speaker button on your microphone before speaking, just so that the recording can properly get everyone's comments and what have you, that would be greatly appreciated. And as always, because this is only an audio recording and I didn't do it myself, as I'm about to say it to everybody else, please announce who you are before you speak so that the clerk has that for the record as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like action on the minutes.
Motion, Stoldal for the record. Stoldal for the record, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as they stand.
Madam Chair, I have a comment on the minutes. It's Colleen. Beck.
Oh, okay.
Colleen Beck is speaking. On page 7, sort of the middle of the page, it says Commissioner Beck said, and then the third line down, it says thought that should be broadened to include paleontological digs as well. That should be paleontological resources as well.
Thank you. Any other corrections? So would you like to redo that?
I'd like to, Stoldal for the record, I'd like to accept those changes within the motion.
I second.
All in
Commissioner Beck.
favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Commissioner Hotchkiss?
I vote aye.
Okay. So it is unanimous. The minutes have been approved. HPC 78824, report by Grave Weitzel, Director of Parks and Recreation, regarding how historic preservation issues are addressed by the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Greg Weitzel, Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Las Vegas. It's my pleasure to be here and present to you today. I'm originally from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and if you're familiar with that area of the country, it's all about history. You know, we were growing up, it was horse and buggy country, and it was all about keeping things the way they were in the past. So no electricity for many of the Amish farms, and it was just a great place to grow up if you loved history, and I do love history. So that's something I want to talk to you about today, is something that I've learned in my history of being a Park and Rec director, is that we gain from the greatness of our past courage and confidence for the future. Today's presentation is going to be about that respect we have for maintaining the integrity of our history and our Parks and Recreation system. how we work closely with the Historic Preservation Commission on significant projects, and then an overview of a couple of projects we've done in the last few years, and I look forward to talking to you about those. So first, the Department of Parks and Recreation was established in 1949 and is one of the oldest departments within the City of Las Vegas organization. In 1950, the first recreation center was opened where the old downtown transportation center was located, adjacent to the old courthouse that's now the home to the Mom Museum. The center was called the Wildcat Lair, and it was a USO club for airmen stationed at Nellis. In addition, it held concerts and social gatherings for the youth of Las Vegas. Unfortunately, this building no longer exists. However, we've taken great care in following all historic preservation guidelines for several other buildings that are all part of our Parks and Recreation system. One of those two historic and storied parks is Lorenzi Park. Lorenzi's Lake Park opened in 1926 with a pool, a dance pavilion, lakes, and orchards. Just as we have today, 90 years ago, they had swim season grand openings and large community celebrations. I think this ticket is really neat from 1932. I want to commend staff for finding these historic pictures as well as some of these other things you'll see throughout this presentation. The property was sold in 1943 and became the Twin Lakes Lodge, a resort getaway with a 48-room hotel. Twin Lakes Lodge hosted scientists and their families working at the Nevada test site. Twin Lakes thrived as a dude ranch servicing the marriage and divorce and tourist industries. The motel played an important role as divorce seekers obtained their needed residency at the motel. The motel also hosted visitors from around the country seeking a real Western experience, offering horseback riding, rodeo events, fishing, and authentic food. The Historic Preservation Commission has been very involved in several projects at the park. Over the many decades the city has owned the park. Designated staff work very closely with the Historic Preservation Officer whenever a project idea has arisen in a known historical location. If there's proposed work on a listed historic site, any plans for construction, renovation, restoration, demolition, or any changes to the structure and/or landscape need a certificate of appropriateness. This process is accomplished through the guidance of the Historic Preservation Officer. If it's something simple, as deemed by the officer, it can be approved administratively, and this can be done adhering to the Historic Designation Ordinance or Title 19 of the Unified Development Code. If, however, something is significant, such as ground disturbing work or major alterations to a listed structure or site, then the applicant must schedule an appearance in front of the HPC. Once again, this is done in assistance with your officer. So Lorenzi Park's a prime example of the importance for this process. As discussion arose in 2008 for the Lorenzi Park Master Plan and the use of the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act, or SNPLMA, funding for the 2010 and 2012 park renovations, staff worked very closely with the Historic Preservation Officer. Initial thoughts were to demolish the St. John home to add additional park amenities. But after conversations with your officer, it was determined that Lorenzi Park was already in the nomination process for the National Historic Registry that was being submitted by HPC. Without the close communication and conscious efforts by Parks and Recreation staff, a historic building sadly may have been demolished, and in turn, the SNPLMA funding may have been reversed. In addition, prior to that 2010 renovations, Public Works staff worked closely with the Historic Preservation Officer on the signage and amenities in the park. Each sign tells the vast history of the park so park patrons can learn more and experience what happened back in the day. The playground equipment was even designed to look like items from the past, such as a stagecoach and the facades of various buildings. The other outstanding historic park we are so proud to operate is Floyd Lamb Park at Tule Springs. Floydland Park at Tule Springs has been a work in progress for thousands of years, with human habitation documented over 13,000 years ago. The Paiute Indians, as well as prospectors, travelers, and the stagecoach line stopped here as they traveled across the desert because of the water from the springs. In 1941, the land was transferred into a working ranch and eventually a guest ranch and a divorce ranch similar to Lorenzi Park. Guests could not only enjoy some R&R while awaiting the required 6-week residency stay for divorce, but the location also became a prime for watching the explosions from the atomic bomb testing that occurred north of the park. The city of Las Vegas purchased the property in 1964 for use as a city park. The park was then acquired by the state of Nevada. And on July 2nd, 2007, it was officially transferred back to the city, at which time the park was renamed the Floydland Park at Tule Springs. Today, the park is host to more than 225,000 visitors a year. And in the last 2 months has been seen record attendance. On average, for example, we see about 17,000 visitors to the park a month. But in May of this year, we had a record 55,000 visitors. It's home to fishing clinics, bird watching groups, burrowing owls, which is a federally protected bird, rabbits, coyotes, community garden beds, and the famous peacocks, just to name a few. The entire park has been designated as a historic area. This is the signage throughout the main park with historic photos of the park and descriptions of the buildings and what they've been used for when it was a working ranch and resort. Once again, staff worked very closely on several elements of the park to maintain its heritage. One of those was the adobe or the Caliche Hut that was originally built in 1916. The original structure was barely standing when the city took back the park. And the Parks and Rec staff worked with your officer and were very eager to obtain funding to restore the structure. Through dedication to the project and with the approval of the HPC, the structure was rebuilt and now serves as another teaching tool for park patrons. Another project some of you may remember is the restoration of the interior of the Foreman's or ranch house. The interior was meticulously restored to resemble what it once looked like in the 1950s. This is just another example of staff working with the HPC and your officer to restore the interior of a ranch house to its original form. One of the most unique features of the park is the hay barn built in 1946. For many years, the barn served as a storage for park maintenance equipment. And upon inspection, the city discovered that the structural integrity of the barn had been deteriorating and was quickly becoming a safety concern. Following the recommendations from the park master plan, and in consideration of the historic significance of the park, plans were developed to renovate the hay barn into an open-air pavilion for community events. This year, the Las Vegas City Council approved funding to begin the hay barn renovation, and we're working to complete the project by early 2021. I'd like to show you a short video courtesy of Mayor Pro Tem Fiore.
We are standing in what could be considered as one of Las Vegas's best-kept secrets and most valuable assets, Floydland Park. Over 680 acres of lush parkland and ponds are located here in the northwest part of the Las Vegas Valley. The wonderful place represents a year-round getaway destination for thousands of Las Vegas residents and visitors who come to our amazing city each year. Sometimes referred to as Old Tule Pond, this stock fishing location was constructed on the side of a historic pond and marsh complex that was used by Native Americans for thousands of years before the recent settlement of southern Nevada. The ponds are supplied by a combination of wells and artesian spring flows that serve as an island of habitat for many wildlife species. Named for the growth of tules, or cattails, it was originally a stagecoach stop between Las Vegas and the many mining districts that sprung up in the late 1800s northwest of Las Vegas along what is now U.S. Highway 95. The city of Las Vegas purchased the park in 1964 and was named after Floyd Lamb, the former state senator and chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. Purchased originally for the water rights, the park has grown and is used by many organizations for various uses, including a gun club, a horseback riding facility, and the Nevada Zoological Society. The park was also once used as a ranch during the 40s and 50s, and a barn was constructed on the property to store alfalfa for local ranch owners. After years of neglect and non-use, the park was eventually transferred to the state of Nevada in 1977, where funds were allocated to develop and restore these beautiful grounds to a state park for all to come and enjoy. 12 years later, the state of Nevada finalized their 1987 master plan, which again reinforced the need to revitalize, restore, and utilize the historic buildings at Floyd Lamb Park. This included reference to the 1978 structural survey and development plan to add expanded parking and renovation to the existing hay barn as a special event center public assembly area. This, they felt, would be the best way to utilize the park and protect its vast historical assets as urban development encroaches upon the park. The park remained essentially the same for many years, with very little accomplished in the way of restoration and improvements, until 2003, when the state legislature passed SB 444, which transferred Floyd Lamb Park back to the city. It was here that the restrictions on the deed made it clear that the park would be used for passive recreation and was expanded to include a clear definition of the park's future as it was originally conceived. This included the now historic hay barn and its designation and use as a special event center for cultural events, group picnics, and public and private gatherings. In 2007, a master plan was completed, and funding was allocated to start restoration on several buildings on the property, as well as funding for special events. The first building that would benefit from this restoration project was the Foreman's house, which is now used as the Visitor Center. This vital building has since served as the focal point for events at the park that include several country music concerts, such as the widely popular Cowboy Christmas Show and Celtic Games.
Moved here to Las Vegas in 2011 with the Boy Scouts. I'm a professional scouter, and that was the first year we were here at Floyd Lamb Park for our Mega Scout Expo, and it's just been a wonderful facility. On smaller scales, we have camporees for our scout troops that camp overnight here and learn scout skills. We have our younger scouts here doing day camps, and so it's just been a great opportunity and a great partnership for the scouts.
Other private and public events are popular there as well, such as weddings, parties, meetings, and a host of other things that benefit and enlighten the community.
With the close working relationship that the Parks and Recreation Department has with your Historic Preservation Officer, along with the guidance from you, the HPC, we've been able to maintain the history and integrity of these amazing historic park sites. Our ultimate goal, my goal as your department director for Parks and Recreation, is to preserve, protect, and enhance our Parks and Recreation system so that we can entertain, educate, and enlighten our residents and visitors for many years to come. I thank you for your attention, and I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Dr. C. Brandt, I haven't been to a meeting in so long. I did not do this properly. So did you have anything to say about this item?
Diane C. Brent for the record. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Greg. So Greg's here as part of the guest speaker program that we had spoken about in our, I believe it was our November workshop, as far as having directors from the different departments within the city to come and give us presentations about how they work with HPC or how we would like to work further with HPC. And the one thing, Greg, that you and I did speak about, and I would like you to speak to the HPC members about, is we talked about, obviously, the close cooperation for any type of construction on these properties, but when there's a special event at one of these historically listed sites, such as Floyd Lamb Park or Lorenzi Park, what is the mechanism in place as far as letting me know, and me in turn letting the HPC know that there is actually something occurring at these parks that is on a large scale?
Currently, we have special events is in multiple departments citywide, and starting July 1st, all special events, council events, community events, and park events will now be under the Parks and Rec Department, which I think the main reason for that is to help make a one-stop shop so that we can communicate and coordinate the special events that are happening. So in the future, what we'd like to do is have Diane be involved in that process, especially when any of large-scale events are being held at parks that have significant historic value.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have any comments
Just
from
a
the
couple
board?
of questions. Stole off for the record. Actually answered the first question I had, and that's which agency within the city, is it Parks or another agency that signs off on what events can be taking place? And so effective July the 1st, that's you.
Correct.
The second is more of the, my middle name, nitpicker.
Sure.
There were several opportunities for improvement in the scripts, both of the what Wildcat Lair really was and a couple in the video. I was wondering if there could be a process to where some of those scripts that are going to become city presentations that have historical elements to that could be filtered through the Historic Preservation Commission and a quick script check. I mean, the world's not going to come to an end, but It's better that the city has accurate information. So if there's a process that we can look forward to kind of tweak those scripts, it'd be not editorially, just the facts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any other comments, questions?
Thank you for your time, and of course, my office is always open if you ever have any questions, comments, or concerns about any of the Parks and Recreation system. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
I'm sorry, one quick question, and I don't know if maybe for Diane or for yourself, the status of the hay barn, where you are in that process. I know there's some controversy, some questions about that, but from the strictly the restoration perspective, not how it's being used, because that's not our oversight.
Sure.
But where we are, you said 2021, you
Yes.
hope to have it done?
Correct. We are working very closely with Diane and SHPO on every aspect, and I'll let Diane, you're probably the most up-to-date right now as of by the hour, because it's changing by the hour, of where we are today.
Yes, Diane Seabrant for the record. Commissioner Stoddall, that will be in our updates as far as what we're going to give you an update on the hay barn construction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Do we have any comments from the public? Okay. We're going to move on to the next item. This is HPC 78747. Diane, could you introduce this one to us, please?
Yes, of course, Diane Seabrant for the record. So this is for a grant request.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, this is Gabby in the clerk's office. Could you please read the item?
So the item is discussion for possible action regarding a grant request from Jennifer Clavin, Grants and Membership Manager of the Neon Museum, in the amount of $5,000 to fund a conservation treatment plan for the museum's sign collection, which is housed at the Neon Museum located at 770 Las Vegas Boulevard North. Now, Diane.
Okay, Diane Seabrant for the record. So thank you. Yes, so this is, I think, one of the first grants that has come across the HPC in recent months. This is from the grant on historic preservation that is available online, and Neon Museum is going to be giving their presentation. And just want to make one correction, Jennifer Cleven will not be making the presentation, it will be Emily Fulmar, and apologies if I say your last name wrong.
Thank you. How about,
It does not work, it's corrupted.
which one?
There's no PowerPoint for this.
Do you want my USB drive?
That'd be awesome, yes.
All right, Diane Seaman for the record, sorry about that. There was an issue with the file, so we have to get the flash drive real quick to download her PowerPoint presentation.
Would you like to give us your name once more, please?
Oh, yes, Emily Fellmer, and that is Felllmer. And I'm the collection specialist for the Neon Museum, and thank you guys all for the opportunity today for me to be able to discuss our conservation treatment plan. So the museum has been around since 1996. We officially opened to the public in 2012. The mission for the museum is to collect, preserve, study, and exhibit iconic Las Vegas signs for educational, historic, arts, and cultural enrichment. Over the years, we have collected about 250 signs that are now exhibited outdoors. Unfortunately, those have taken its toll with the environmental factors that they have been dealing with. Our first example to show how our collection has been degrading over the years is our Chapel by the Courthouse sign. Over 4 years, we noticed that there was major paint loss and paint delamination. Most of this happens due to the fact that the temperatures get so hot during the day that the metal expands and that the paint no longer has the binding materials that it once had. And with many of our signs, they were originally hand-painted, so we would hate to have that get lost throughout history for our future generations. Another example of degradation is oxidation through our collection. With rain, as well as the paint delamination, a lot of our signs have become heavily rusted over, and also losing that hand-painted design originally as well. One example of us trying to help mitigate deterioration lately has been to move some of our pieces indoors. We moved our free aspirin tender sympathy sign indoors just a few months ago since the vinyl was falling off of the sign. Also, you can see how there are many different layers to some of our signs. If we restore them, that means we take away some of those original layers, which the sign originally dates back to the 1960s. Also, if we do restore signs, that doesn't mean that it helps protect them forever. So the Red Barn was restored not long before it was presented at the Fashion Show Mall in 2017. Though just in the 2 years that it's been back into the main exhibit, it has had heavy fading of the paint, which also is a concern that we'll have for long-term preservation. Over the years, since we did make note of the degradation of our collection, we've performed our map report in 2015 to have, it was an ILMS-funded grant that we had a conservator come out to assess our collection and the museum in general to see how we can do better over the years. That kind of gave a general idea of how we could help protect our collection, but it didn't give very specific details of how we should do it. Then in 2018, we did have our conservationist, I'm so sorry, scratch that please. A conservator as well come out to do our collections assessment for preservation. That really did make us feel that we needed to move a lot of our pieces indoors, though that is not very doable for us currently. And we also really do want to help preserve the pieces forever, so we really want to align with the best practices out in the fields, especially aligning with the Foundation for Advancement in Conservation. They have a great code of ethics that we really do want to follow as well as we have started our accreditation process through the American Alliance of Museums. But to further our best practices as a cultural institution, we are proposing that we have an FIAC accredited conservator come out to really do material analysis on our collection and to help stabilize our outdoor signs and hopefully prevent the paint delamination and fading that has been taking place over the years. Also, by the end of this project, we would hope to have a white paper produced that can be shared through to researchers as well as other institutions that collect neon pieces, particularly with how far preservation for neon signs has gone across the United States. We would really love to be able to share that nationwide to help further our historic preservation. Also, we would love to have a discussion panel eventually with the conservator that comes to assess our collection and have a nice public event surrounded around that. That will be the end of my presentation, so I want to thank you all very much for your time today, and please feel free to forward me any questions.
So, thank you so very much. Take a breath.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yes.
Okay, good. So are there any comments or questions from any of the commissioners?
If not, Mr. Chairman, Stoloff, for the record, like to make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Laramie, I did just have a couple comments, if that's okay.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Commissioner Laramie, for the record, I do have a couple quick comments.
Please.
I just wanted to suggest that you kind of laid out a basic restoration plan and the different phases for your restoration plan. And I know in the past, you've sometimes had projects where you allowed volunteers to assist with the restoration. And I think it would be a great way to potentially bring volunteers, community volunteers, back into your organization if there was some way to incorporate them into the restoration plan as well once the work and the training starts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? So we have a motion on the floor. Do I get a second? So it has been moved and properly second that we approve a grant of $5,000 to the Neon Museum for the treatment plan for the signs. All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Any opposed? And did I hear Hotchkiss?
Hotchkiss votes aye.
Okay, thank you. So it is passed unanimously.
Thank you very
so
much.
much for coming.
Thank you.
Our next item is HPC 78748, discussion for possible action regarding comments and suggested edits for the Las Vegas High School National Register of Historic Places nomination update report submitted by Northwind Resource Consulting. Dr. Seabrant?
Thank you, Diane Seabrant, for the record. So this was something that we've been in long discussions about this over the course of the last several months. And this is the renomination of the high school property. I sent this file to everybody several weeks ago, so I'm hoping everybody had a chance to read it or at least look over it a little bit. And after Ms. Mooney has given her presentation, the comments that you have, any suggested edits, we do still have time on the schedule as far as having Northwinds go back and make any of the suggested changes before we have to submit it to SHPO. So I'll turn it over to Courtney Mooney. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Courtney.
Nice to see you guys. For the record, Courtney Mooney, Northwind Resource Consulting. And this is the presentation for the amended National Register of Historic Places nomination for the Las Vegas Academy, Las Vegas, Clark County, Nevada. That did not work. Oh, that was the backwards one. See, I got a tutorial and apparently I wasn't listening. Already I've messed up. So in 2019, the city contracted with Northwind Resource Consulting to prepare an updated National Register nomination for the LVA campus, which we completed that historic research and documented every building and structure in 2020. And we found that Frazier Hall was eligible for listing in the National Register as a contributing resource. And we completed that nomination with multiple recommended amendments, which we will discuss today. So, excuse me just one moment. Make sure I don't miss anything. So the Las Vegas High School Academic Building and Gymnasium were listed in the National Register in 1986. And those are outlined in the red boundary that you see on the screen here. And this plan sketch was taken from the original nomination, so it's not necessarily to scale. This nomination included the academic building and the gymnasium and Knapp Hall, which is identified on this plan as classroom. And Knapp Hall was constructed in 1972, and it was considered a non-contributing structure. However, they probably included it because it made the boundary a little bit neater. And these buildings were listed in the National Register for their architectural significance and association with the development of public secondary education in the city of Las Vegas. So the high school is now referred to as Las Vegas Academy of the Arts. So for the purposes of this presentation, if I say campus or LVA, I'm referring to the campus, which encompasses approximately 17 acres and 3 parcels. The campus is partially located within the Las Vegas High School Neighborhood Historic District in downtown Las Vegas, which is an urban, completely developed area. It's located east of Las Vegas Boulevard, also known as the Strip, and south of Fremont Street, the historically commercial district of Las Vegas. So the campus currently contains 15 buildings and 1 athletic field. They're all labeled here. The existing buildings were constructed during 4 building campaigns. You have the original 1930s construction, the 1940s and 1950s post-war campaign, which is, 1940s and then shown in blue, and the 1950s post-war campaign in pink. And these were to accommodate the rise in student population, obviously from World War II. And then we have the 1970s campus renovation and new facilities with a couple of, with the addition on the gym, and all of the facilities that were constructed in the 2000s. So the original 1930s campaign buildings, they include the academic building and gymnasium, which were both constructed in 1930. At the northwest area of campus. They were both designed by Reno architecture firm George A. Ferris and Son. And if you note here, this is a current photograph, you can see the addition on the gym, which is on the left side, essentially the south facade. The post-war campaign was inspired by a lack of adequate facilities to accommodate the influx of families to the area. A public school administration building, which is now called Sunset Hall, was constructed in 1947, followed by the athletic field in 1948. Frazier Hall and the vocational building were constructed in 1950, and all of these were designed by prominent local architect A. Lacey Warswick. These were followed by the auditorium, designed by Claude Beelman in 1953, and Post Hall, which was designed by Jack Miller and Associates in 1959. A study hall and music room were also constructed during this period, but they've since been demolished. And these buildings weren't really located in any specific area of the campus. They're kind of scattered around. The 1970s building campaign kind of just hoped to address aging facilities through additions and alterations, as well as the construction of 3 buildings in the late modern style. These were added to the west and central areas of the campus, and these are the cafeteria, which was constructed in 1972, the Humanities Building, which is called Knapp Hall, and that was constructed south of the academic building and actually attached to the academic building in 1972, and the Locker Room Building in 1973, which is physically attached via a covered walkway to the east facade of the gymnasium. And additionally, the large south addition to the gymnasium was completed in 1977, and we don't know who the architect is for that. In the 2000s, There were 3 new buildings constructed at the southeast and central areas of campus. Those include the Tate Snyder Kimsey designed Visual Arts Building and Loden Theater. The music complex and additions were constructed onto the north and south ends of the vocational building in 2000. The portable buildings were also installed near the locker rooms in 2013. So initially the campus was evaluated for eligibility as a historic district. Northwind, as we mentioned earlier, visited the entire campus and took photographs of all of the buildings to try to determine if it met the National Register criteria. It has to have, in order for a district to be considered eligible, it has to have 51% of the properties must be considered contributing, and they must meet a specific criteria. So the period of they should have been constructed within the period of significance, which Northwind is recommending be extended to 1959. So they would have to have been constructed between 1930 and 1959. They would have to possess one or more criteria of significance, and that's either criteria A, which is associated with significant events, criteria B, which is associated with significant individual, or C, which is significant architectural qualities. And they must retain sufficient historic integrity to convey their significance. So as a contributor, when you're looking, when you're evaluating districts, buildings for districts, you have a little bit of more flexibility in terms of integrity. Northwind, we like to call it the 3 strikes rule. So you have up to 2 modifications, 2 materials or design that would be in keeping with the Secretary of the Interior standards, and that would be considered acceptable. A 3rd modification would kick it off the contributing list. Again, the eligibility criteria for individual buildings they would have to be constructed within our proposed extended period of significance. They would have to possess one or more of the NRHP criteria, which I explained earlier, and retain most aspects of integrity, which include the location, design, settings, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And we reviewed all of the buildings and determined that only Frazier Hall met that criteria. So Frazier Hall is a 1-story reinforced concrete building with a basement. It's oriented east-west along Bridger Avenue on the north end of the campus. It has a rectangular plan with a flat roof. It's about 21,000 square feet in size. It was designed in an Art Deco style by architect A. Lacey Warswick. It has a decorative frieze and pilasters conforming to the style of the campus's earliest buildings. It's in good condition, retains integrity of location, design, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. We did not feel that it retains integrity of setting due to the multiple alterations on the campus, as well as on Bridger Avenue, and within the Las Vegas High School Neighborhood Historic District. So it was recommended eligible under criterion A for its association with the development of secondary education in Las Vegas and increased emphasis on architectural design, and association with the city's post-war school building campaign, and under C, as one of the few intact Art Deco buildings in Las Vegas. It's designed by A.L. Warswick, and it's one of the few remaining examples of a custom architecturally designed schoolhouse, which was constructed during the tenure of the 5th Supervision District in Southern Nevada. So Northwind is recommending that Frazier Hall be added to the original boundaries, which would increase the boundary to about 3 acres. The name change for the nomination would be the Las Vegas High School Historic District. And I know it's a little bit close to the other one, but that's the Las Vegas High School Neighborhood Historic District. The listing type would change from building to district. The boundary increase, again, would accommodate Frazier Hall, and the period of significance would increase from 1930 to 1959. And the revised boundaries would look like this. So that concludes that presentation. Happy to take questions, comments.
Thank you. Commissioners, this is a report that means a lot to a lot of people here in the city and to a lot of the commissioners. So I'd like to ask that as you make your comments, that if one person states a fact, that you not repeat it, just so that we can be as brief as possible, but as comprehensive as possible. We want to get all the facts on the table. So who would like to begin? Bob?
Stovall for the record. Stovall for the record. A couple of just sort of housekeeping things or more. I noticed with one of the slides for Frazier Hall, it would look like circa 1950. And the question really is within the rules or regulations or the filters that you use, how do you determine the date? Is it when the construction was started, when the construction ended, when the place opened? What's usually the filter that goes through? Because I heard it was 1947 for Frazier Hall, so I don't.
We received records from the Clark County School District that said 1950.
Okay.
And we have the original plans from the Clark County School District that are dated to 1950.
But when you're going through the weeds, you look at when the construction started, when the building opened, when it was done?
Oh, that's a good question. I know a lot of people, you're saying that you think it started in 47.
I'm not sure. I just don't know what the rule is, what the Department of the Interior says you can use as a date to make something older or younger or.
I'm not sure. I've seen it both ways.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen it both ways. I don't know that the National Register has a best practices on that, but I could find out if you would like me to and get back to you on that.
It just sort of in the weeds question, but the other, you answered the bigger question by simply saying we had heard over the last few months that there were a couple of buildings that could be nominated for the National Register, but in different categories. But if I heard you right, you're saying after you've looked at all the buildings, only Frazier Hall could move forward.
There may have been, it may have gotten lost in translation, but there were a couple of other buildings like the vocational building and Sunset Hall that we looked at. Sunset Hall was tricky because when it was originally constructed, it wasn't constructed as part of the campus. It was just constructed as an administration building for the school district. So it wasn't really associated with Las Vegas High School as a school. The vocational building, unfortunately, has had a couple of alterations so that are pretty significant. And so in talking to the property representative, ultimately what they communicated to us is that they would like to remove those alterations when they have funding, and that they would like to possibly rehabilitate Sunset Hall, but there are that would be a very complicated project involving just basically retention of the street-facing facades, essentially. So we really looked seriously at those two other buildings and kind of determined that maybe in the future those could be added if those additions are removed, and if they decide to rehab Sunset Hall appropriately, we would look at that, or somebody would look at that, and it could be added, they could be added later.
That sort of deals with the question, when you're three strikes, so to speak, do you take in consideration the strikes that could be removed and no longer be a strike, and in essence sort of some sort of restoration, or are the three strikes that you get, this has changed so significantly that we can't take that out and take that out, and we're back to where it would be a restoration project?
Yeah, I mean, certain things are weighed more heavily than others. Obviously, when there's been a large addition, you can pretty much assume that in this case, like with the vocational building, that there was a loss of a significant amount of historic material. They also closed some of the skylights on the top, and they did some other things. Right. Of course, everything is reversible with money, so how much effort are they going to put into it? But at this point, it would not have passed the National Register's review had we recommended that, saying that these are reversible and they plan to take them off.
The last question is and I'm not sure why I took such emotional offense at it, but the Las Vegas High School auditorium somehow was renamed after its architect, the Beeman Auditorium. It's the first time I've heard it referred to as that.
You know what, I will look into that because I noticed that yesterday, and I believe that we must have seen it somewhere, so I will go back and take a look at that, so.
And the reason Las Vegas
Go ahead,
Auditorium is not, it has 3 strikes against it.
Hold on just a second. So this building has, here is the other issue that we had. We had a boundary issue. So had we looked at including that auditorium, the boundary would extend to the entire campus. And at that point, we are now going back looking at it as a district. Or you have like a non-contiguous boundary, which is really hard to, in order for it to meet those requirements, there has to be integrity of setting in between there a little bit, which it doesn't have because it has all of this infill on the campus.
Right.
So it would have been a really difficult argument to include the auditorium with the condition of the campus as it is now. So it might be something that when they look at it later, if they decide to rehabilitate the vocational building in Sunset Hall, if that becomes, you know, there might be a better boundary justification amendment for a justification for a boundary amendment at that time. But the other thing too was that the auditorium is not really the same architectural style. It just wasn't a great fit, even though it really has not had any alterations that I can see, other than at some point it was connected to Sunset Hall in the back, but that's not really significant. So again, and we had lengthy discussions with SHPO about this, and they agreed that this was the best way to go, and that something like this could be reviewed later if they decide to rehabilitate Sunset Hall and the vocational building appropriately.
I heard your words. I'm not sure I completely understand, or maybe it's just I don't necessarily agree. But so my second to last question, are we being asked to do multiple things? One is to approve with any changes we make the nomination to send to SHPO, but we're also being asked to now create a boundary, change the boundary?
If Frazier Hall is added, the boundary to that original 1986 nomination will be changed to include Frazier.
And limit all the other buildings?
Right, but most of those buildings are already included in the national, or the high school district, I mean the neighborhood high school district. So there, I mean, all of these buildings with the exception of the vocational building and the auditorium, because the district cuts off just west of there. They're all in the Las Vegas high school neighborhood district already.
But they have to now be in the boundary. In order to meet, the Frazier Hall now has to be within the boundary, the new boundary. I'm not sure why we're changing the boundary, other than there's a rule that if you want to put Frazier Hall in the historic register, you've got to change the boundary.
Well, we're amending that original nomination, and we're amending it by adding Frazier Hall. So are you wondering why we're not just nominating it individually?
I guess what I'm having some paranoid that the Clark County School District will now say the auditorium is not within the high school boundary, historic boundary, so therefore we don't have to worry about it at all.
Oh, we're not, nothing's going to change for that building, which is not in any boundary right now.
Okay, yeah.
Nothing will change for that unless the Las Vegas high school neighborhood. I'm not sure why it wasn't, I looked through the original nomination and I couldn't see any justification for not including that section, because it was, maybe they weren't old enough at the time when it was being done. Because I know that the neighborhood study was done in the 80s. Correct, like early 80s, 81 or 82. So it's possible they just weren't included because they weren't considered old enough. But those won't change. The only thing that we're recommending is that the boundary for the Las Vegas High School district, well, we were recommending that it be changed to a district because there's more than 2 buildings, would just be expanded to increase Frazier, which is kind of the easiest way to get Frazier in there.
And the last question is, if we wanted to move forward at a later date for this commission to fund a study of the Las Vegas Auditorium as a standalone potential nominee, is that something that would make some sense? That's not the right word, but would be doable?
I think it would be helpful to look at. I think in our research, we didn't really find anything overly significant about the architect. The architecture itself is mid-century modern. It's kind of cool, but it's not, you know, I don't know that it's the highest and best example of its type, even of a theater. I'm not sure that it would be eligible. I think
Other criteria, though, lots of important events took place at that building.
possibly, yeah. We didn't run across any of that research, so I would say it's probably a worthwhile endeavor.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
So any other comments from the commissioners? We'll go right down the line.
Okay. Colleen Beck for the record. I just want to follow up on several things. I totally support Vice Chair Stoldal's position on the auditorium. People often comment on the appearance, especially when you're looking at it from the street, much less the interior is very intact. And I'm disappointed it's not in this nomination. I would have been interested to have known, and it probably wouldn't have worked, if the entire boundary of the high school, say as of '59, had been looked at. And because it would seem to me if you had the original boundary at that age, and then you've got the field, which I know no one wants to preserve the field probably, but it still could be a contributing area within the school. And that's my other question is, sometimes buildings aren't eligible on their own, but they're definitely eligible as contributing, which means they don't have to reach such a high threshold when they're being added to a district. So that raises some concerns for me because I didn't see that issue addressed in here.
So we did evaluate everything as a potential district. Unfortunately, like the field specifically, has been significantly altered. So when it was built, it had concrete bleachers, it had a track that ran around it, there were a lot of, it extended to the full size where the tennis courts are now, so it's significantly altered. And we found that with most of the buildings. In fact, almost all of them have been either altered or there were some kind of non-compatible infill, like the 1970s buildings, which just weren't really associated with any specific architect. Well, we couldn't even find the architect. They weren't associated with a specific event, which, you know, unlike the 1950s building campaign, was really documented as, you know, where the funding came from and why those buildings were there. And the 1970s buildings were kind of like, well, you know, we're guessing they were just addressing growth needs and they had aging facilities. So there wasn't really anything that we could, believe me, Commissioner Beck, we tried, we really did try, but that infill just wasn't there. It wasn't there, it couldn't support a district nomination.
So was there any discussion about some of the significance being there that you have these, you know, quite old high school buildings, and you get to see how it changes through time, and that the age could have been taken up into the 70s, early 70s at least then, because it's a interesting example of how high school, you know, changed and adapted to the times over time. And I think that there's a possibility of an eligibility under that.
We looked at it like if it was a neighborhood, and we were looking at a neighborhood for district eligibility. and there would be a lot of infill. And of course, the infill shows how things changed over time. But if you have too many changes that aren't compatible with, that don't have any, they aren't attributed to any sort of significance, then you have a large number of non-contributing structures. And that's kind of how we looked at this. I mean, if the 1970s buildings had, if our research had found some sort of significance that we could have tied them to, it might have been a different story, but they were just built there for reasons of, increasing the resources for the students. And it just wasn't the same. Again, we had lengthy discussions with SHPO, and they concurred with us, but I think the best bet moving forward is to take a look at that other cluster down there in the southeast corner once the school moves forward with some of their plans.
And that was the impression I had reading this, is that it was based on an approach to a neighborhood rather than maybe an approach to a campus. And so I'm a little uncomfortable with that, but I hear what you're saying in terms of consultation and other people being talked to. There's a couple lines in this document that I have a little concern about. On page 10, at the top paragraph, at the end, it says, the LVHS campus as a whole could not be recommended as eligible due to alterations and infill development occurring after the amended period of significance. Additionally, due to campus rehabilitation and development plans, the property representative has requested that only Frazier Hall be recommended as eligible for listing as part of the boundary increase. I'm totally baffled by this last sentence and why it's in here.
So we know from experience that if there's opposition to a National Register nomination, a lot of times the State Historic Preservation Officer or the keeper of the National Register will not move forward with it. And this was, I included this in the report specifically so that the commission and that SHPO and everyone was aware of the potential opposition. So I could take it out. Certainly SHPO's aware of it during verbal conversations, but I just included it as part of the context.
Okay, so the issue I see with this sentence, and I now understand why you have it here, is it indicates that there may be other eligible properties, but we were limited to looking at Frazier Hall. Is that what this is supposed to convey?
Nope, it is just, it's just a statement of the property owner's communication to me about what they wanted.
The school district, you're saying?
Yes.
I'm sorry. So this is the school district input, stole out for the record.
Correct, that's what we were told at the site visit. And it was mostly because, and I'll clarify that, it was mostly because they wanted the opportunity to explore what they were doing with the other buildings. But it is in their plan to restore them. So it is.
What we're here to do today is to provide feedback and suggested edits to the draft. So just know that that's what we can do. There was one other person who had a comment.
Could I just follow up?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
So you're just notifying everyone, including the keeper at the National Register, that you were told this was the only one that could be looked at?
It was just requested by the representative, that they were saying, this is what we're comfortable with.
Okay, so now my other question is, I'm not sure who can answer this. Going forward, as they are going to make alterations and move forward with their master plan for the campus, will they be doing a Section 106 survey to evaluate the impact of their activities?
I don't believe that unless they get federal funding to do any planning activities, that they need to meet Section 106 requirements.
So on Section 106, in the requirement for federal funding, is it required to be to that specific project and not to the school district?
Yes.
Okay.
However, they are required to communicate with the State Historic Preservation Office for, there's a Nevada revised statute, which, because they're a, I'm going to forget the word, it's not quasi-government, but they're a governmental entity, they have to communicate with SHPO for any alterations.
Would we know that?
I don't believe it would be publicly noticed. I don't know how the commission would be made aware of it.
That's, for us, I think that's, for me anyway, that is concerning, that we wouldn't be aware of what was going on at the campus, and maybe have an opportunity to suggest alternatives that might be a little better for the historic context. So maybe that's something we can look at in the future.
Well, the school district is not required to even report to the HPC.
Yeah.
So there is, but if, I do know that Dr. Siebert has an open line of communication with Josh, which I can't remember his last name right now. He's with the, he's the principal, vice principal of the LBA campus. And maybe that's something that could be worked out where, you know, she's made aware of future changes.
Okay.
So what happens today after we give you our list of suggested edits? Are those going to be then put into this report before it goes to anyone else?
So far, to be clear, I just want to make sure, I haven't actually had a request for a suggested edit. So I'm wondering if that's where Commissioner Beck, if she would like me to remove that sentence, I'm happy to do that. Are there any other edits?
Okay.
I'm not recommending that at this point.
Okay, so, yes, and then we'll talk about all of our suggested edits.
Commissioner Laramie, for the record. So actually, I wanted to recommend, because I had a lot of the same questions and concerns that Commissioner Stodel and Commissioner Beck already stated, that your reasoning for and how you evaluated the buildings be reflected in the report, because it really wasn't clear to me when I read the report why Sunset or the vocational or the auditorium were considered ineligible. Even if it's just a table, that information, as well as some of the high school's plans to restore the vocational building potentially, or at least remove the postmodern additions, that's not reflected in the report either, and I think all of that could inform future work. So I think it's important that that gets in there. And I wanted to go back to Commissioner Beck's comment about kind of evaluating the school as it changed over time, and could that potentially be a valid argument for a non-contiguous boundary that could include the auditorium? Because although I understand why the boundary can't, you know, include the entire campus, it does seem like because the entire area is still a school and it grew to accommodate the school's needs, that I think there might be a strong argument for a non-contiguous boundary that could be approved.
It's possible. In my discussions with SHPO, they didn't think the argument was strong enough, but we could, you know, certainly explore that in a future phase.
Yeah, okay. So primarily, I think that the document should just better reflect how the buildings were evaluated and why they were recommended or not recommended, and kind of those three strikes, like Bob said, what contributed to the decisions.
So I feel a lot of passion among the commissioners. So I don't think you should hesitate about the edits that you would like to see added to this report. So 3 years from now, don't let it come back and you feel regret because you didn't put an edit in the report. So I don't know how to go about this, listing the edits that would like, yes?
Could I make a comment?
Yes.
Calling back for the record. This is not really a usual survey report where you would be going through building by building and eligibility on each one and why it's non-contributing, et cetera. This is actually the National Register of Historic Places registration form, which, as I understand it, always focuses on the history that makes the properties that are discussed in here eligible. So the 2020 report, did we ever see it by Northwind? Have I just forgotten it? Or
By whom?
who did the 2020 survey? Do I have the wrong date?
No, Northwind did the survey, the documentation report, but it wasn't a report. This was touring the campus with staff and SHPO and taking photographs and discussing the histories of each building. So that's where the survey was just an actual physical survey.
But there was no report made on that. It was a visit?
No.
Okay. So I'm just concerned here that we're starting to get confused between what would be a survey report and what is a National Register nomination form.
Correct. And we had discussed with staff early on whether or not an actual survey report was needed, because I was unaware of the report that Nevada Preservation Foundation had done with the school district and other partners. And then I was kind of confused as to why we were going what I thought was out of order. I thought, maybe we need to do a survey first, and then we can take the recommendations from the survey and move into an eligibility nomination. But then it was revealed to me that there had already been a pretty extensive survey, so we did not need to do another historic resource survey. So then we just move forward with the amended nomination.
So I think some of our issues are that we did not see that report and, didn't review that report. And so we're asking questions that would have been in that determination phase, earlier.
So you didn't see the Nevada Preservation Foundation report?
Did we?
I thought it went, I'm sorry. I don't know anything about how it was presented to the commission.
Yes. I know, it's back, just
Okay.
talking about where we stand here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You don't have to solve all our problems.
I know. I just thought, it was my understanding you'd seen it, but I apologize.
Commissioner Laramie, so just to clarify, I don't think Nevada Preservation Foundation did the report. I think the report you're referring to was the one contracted through Centennial Commission. Nevada Preservation Foundation did work with the school district on their master plan, but it was, I don't have a lot of information on that, as I wasn't working on that when I was with that organization, but it wasn't a historic structures report that was part of that master plan work. It was more of suggestions and kind of historic context and how they could perhaps restore some of the buildings. But I do think some of the disconnect for me, because I have read the Centennial Commission report, is in that historic structures report, they seem very positive that Sunset and the vocational building and the auditorium could contribute to a district and make the recommendation to pursue a national nomination towards a district. And so then when we get the national nomination, it's, we're finding that that's not true, and the gap in information isn't documented anywhere. So maybe it's not appropriate to document it in the nomination, but perhaps an attachment or, an appendix-like document or something that reflects how those decisions were ultimately made would be helpful, because the historic structures report seems to think that the nominations are eligible or would be found eligible.
So is that what we want to do? Do we want to attach the other report to this as an appendix? Are those the edits that we want to make?
Well, sure. I start off with the record. I think that basically they're calling for taking things out of this nomination that don't apply to the specific nomination. I think there's two elements in here. One is why Frazier Hall should be in the National Register, and also the statement why the other buildings that are potentially could be nominated are not. Those are two separate issues.
Are both of those issues in the other report?
I don't know if there's another report.
I'm talking about the report from the Centennial Commission that you're talking about attaching as an appendix?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the issues, Commissioner Stodel?
I don't think we're talking about attaching the Centennial Commission report.
Oh.
I think that's a separate document. I think what we're saying is we need to pull out of this proposed document the reason why other buildings on the campus are not included, and simply focus this document, this nomination, on Frazier Hall. But let me quickly back up. It's my understanding that Clark County School District does not have veto power. They can't say which buildings should be nominated and which buildings shouldn't be.
They can't, no, but when they expressed to me what their wishes were,
No, I understand that, but I mean,
Right.
according to the rules, Clark County School District can't say, I don't want this building, I don't want that building. They don't have the veto power. They can say that during a public hearing, whatever, but, and it's also not clear in here that the Clark County School District says the current owners. I think that we need to be a little more, so to me, there's a second document, and that's the document that other buildings may be potentially could be nominated, but the Clark County School District doesn't want those buildings. They only want Frazier Hall. That's a separate, to me, a separate issue, because we, as a commission, could also say, thank you very much, Clark County School District, but we're going to hire a company to go look unilaterally at the Las Vegas High School auditorium and see whether it's eligible. We could do that, and it's likely that somebody may, at the end of this meeting, suggest that. So I think the edit, Mr. Chair, is to take out anything that does not deal specifically with Frazier Hall in this nomination.
Commissioner Laramie, my edit is just to, in whatever way is appropriate for a National Register nomination, to incorporate some of the decisions that were made and how they were made about the other buildings. I don't think anything needs to be taken out about Frazier Hall, though.
May I clarify really quickly, which might help some of this discussion? The National Register nomination format is very specific. So we in addressing the, like an appendix, that would not be allowed to be submitted with the National Register nomination. And also, because we are amending a nomination and recommending the addition of Frazier Hall, there is not really a place to go into a lengthy discussion about how we evaluated all of the other buildings. It has to focus on Frazier Hall, which we did, but we also added the additional information, which was the context that we came up with that has all of the additions listed on each building. So and that's kind of the minimum or the maximum that we could do, is listing all of the changes in terms of when these buildings were built and the information that we had on them, but it does not say specifically that these were not considered contributing, because it was just assumed that because we listed all of the alterations that had occurred and that we summarized it saying that, they've had a lot of alterations and that's why they weren't chosen. So that's how we address that. But I can work with SHPO to see if we can add more specific language that addresses these other buildings without taking the nomination too far astray.
So is that what we want to do, or do we want to start from ground zero?
Colleen Beck, I actually have come around to thinking that your sentence you put in on additionally, only Frazier Hall will be recommended as eligible for listing due to the property representative probably isn't as important historically. Say someone in 20 years looks at this. You don't want someone to take this and say, oh, well, nothing else is eligible, but this indicates there was a limitation. And then on page 31, the last sentence on that page says, due to alterations in infill development occurring throughout the history of the LBA campus, the campus as a whole could not be recommended as eligible for listing as a historic district. The thing I do like about that sentence is that it doesn't exclude other buildings from being considered. Correct? Am I reading that right, Courtney?
You are, yes.
So those two combined actually open a door to do further work at the campus and look at other buildings. So I'm okay with that.
So Commissioner Beck, you don't have any edits to this report?
No, I wish we had a real survey report. That's my frustration.
Okay.
And I think even at the last meeting it was discussed, this is kind of backwards, that usually you have a survey report and then out of it grows the National Register nominations. And this has just been a confusing process.
Bob, do you have edits for this draft report?
Yes. And I'm going to go to the page. Well, we need to clear up just a small thing, the title of the Las Vegas High School Auditorium. But let's go back to page 10. Yeah, what it was, page 10? Or was it 14? What page were you on?
I was on 10 and then the last page.
10, okay. I think there is no reason to cloak the Clark County School District in the phrase of property representative. I think it needs to be very, very clear that the Clark County School District opposes any other building other than Frazier Hall. Property representative I'm not sure that somebody 20 years from now, they're going to have to do some deductive reasoning, but they could probably come up with the Clark County School District, but there's no reason to make the reader work at who the property representative is. It's important that Frazier Hall move forward and get on the National Register. But I think it's also important that if this whole paragraph is going to stay in there, that we point out it's the Clark County School District.
Madam Chair, can I just point out, though, one of the things that makes the way the report or the nomination is written better is that it is a representative of the school district, not the school district, because as you sit in this board, you know that if the board acts, if we say this Clark County School District, it implies a board action or a review versus at this time, this is a representative for the school district that is making the comment that they are only supportive at this time of Frazier Hall, which again doesn't mean that they're unsupportive for anything else necessarily, but at this time, they're only supporting Frazier Hall's addition to the nomination. So I just would put that out there as there is kind of a difference between when something is governed by a board and when something is, and what a staff or a technical recommendation may be when our consultants or our historic preservation officer are working with those representatives of the district and not necessarily directly with that board. So I just put that out there for food for thought.
So is it possible to just say who he is representing?
I think that part can be clear, yes. I don't want to construe it as somehow there was some board action to make this
all for the record.
position. I think it, and I'll defer to the consultant, but I think it is a representative of the district that's making this. But I think it should be clear, maybe instead of property owner, it could be of the school district, the Clark County School District.
Still off for the record, this was not some guy that drove by and said, hey, I don't think you should do that.
Okay.
And somebody with enough power that you put it in here and you didn't recommend any other building. So this wasn't just some random representative. This was somebody that you felt spoke on the authority of the entire Clark County School District. Otherwise, we possibly would have had some other buildings. I hear what you're saying, representative, but this is the Clark County School District. Somebody, it's not a representative, that's a person.
So I think that we can put the Clark County School District in there. Okay. Is that correct? We can add the representative of the Clark County School District so that everybody will know 20 years from now who is opposed to doing this in this way.
Just to clarify, Commissioner Beck, I think, just stated that she wanted the sentence removed.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I took
Okay.
that back because I started looking at it down the road, that those sentences left openings for more work to be done.
Got it.
But it can be changed, I'm
Commissioner Laramie?
Yes, Commissioner Laramie, I'm sorry, I do have one more comment that I forgot to say. I think it would be also helpful to include an overall site map, like you have in your slide presentation, for where all of the buildings that you're just going through in the context are located, because the only map in the actual report is the boundary, and we don't really see where the other buildings are in the overall campus, so I think that would be helpful.
So is there a process, so we have 2 edits. We're going to identify the representative. The edit that Commissioner Laramie just made, are we in agreement with that one, those who are passionate about this? So are we going to have other edits within the next couple of days, maybe, that we want to think about now that we've had this discussion with Courtney? We're good? We're complete?
I'm good.
Okay, you good, Bob?
I think if you're suggesting that, because this is a discussion item as well, that if over the next couple of days, and I think that we heard the doctor say that we have some time here, that we could simply, or any suggested recommendations, we could send them to you, and then at our next meeting, we would actually vote on the document, if that's what we're saying.
So that's why I was asking the question. If we need additional time, we know that we have a couple of days, that we can still make some edits to this report. So are we comfortable to go ahead today and leave this as it is, knowing that we can get in touch with Dr. C. Brandt and make some additional recommendations?
This is Diane Seaburn for the record. So we do have to keep in mind that North Winds is on a contract with this as far as their timeline. You do have a couple days to get me any type of edits that you would like to see. If you could get those to me by July 1st, I can get those to North Wind. We may have to, I'll talk to Courtney offline and see if we may have to change the submission date to SHPO due to that.
So how much time do we have without having to change the date?
I was going to say, Madam Chair, to that point about the date with SHPO and the established timeline under the contract. So what I heard Vice Chair Stovall say was bring it back. What I would ask is, I haven't heard anything here that is substantial in nature.
Well, I think adding the school district's name to the document is very significant.
Oh, I don't want to minimize making those changes, but I haven't heard anything that's a significant alteration in the content of the nomination. So what I would ask is that when whoever does the motion, if we can motion to move this for approval, subject to the changes discussed here and any subsequent changes that are submitted to Dr. Seabrandt by the 1st, so that, again, she can then work with the consultant team, make those adjustments so that we can stay on track with the current schedule, both that we're contractually obligated with the consultant, but also so that we can continue to move this forward since it has languished a little bit for the team for a while.
So we know that it has languished and that this is happening because of COVID-19. So is there anyone else with any other comments before we place this motion?
One last, still off of the record. At the consultant's request, we delayed this. This was due last year. So we moved it up several months. So I don't think a delay of 30 days on our part for us to have additional time now that we've had this public discussion to send that information to the city's HPO, and then we can vote on it formally at our next. I'm not comfortable at this juncture to vote on it. That's me. Thank you.
I would just add that the delay was due to the confusion over the survey, the site survey. We were in discussions with staff about whether or not a survey should be completed.
It was delayed, though. For whatever
Correct,
reason.
but I just wanted to make clear that it wasn't at our request.
So are we saying that people are going to go back, or commissioners are going to go back and relook at this form now that we've had this discussion? Is that what we're looking at?
So we have the ability to look at this for a few more days. It sounds as if we might have some edits after this discussion.
Okay. I spent hours on this already.
So you're good? You don't
No.
have any edits?
No.
Commissioner Laramie?
I'm good. I think all my edits have been put on the record here.
Your last statement was a bit muffled.
I'm sorry, I am comfortable. I think all of my edits were said today.
Okay. Bob?
Well, one edit is clearly there. It's including the Clark County School District. What there seems, could you say your edits? Doctor, do you know what edits should be made?
Diane Seabrandt, for the record. I'm listening to this conversation from today. I understand the edits that you are requesting. Is that your question? Or do you have anything further than that?
The other edits that are from the other commissions, not just myself.
Correct, yes, the whole commission, yes, which I think Ms. Mooney and I have listened to this and noted them. Unless you think you're going to have further, if not, then we could move forward with the understanding that these edits will be made before its final submission.
So I'll offer the record. What's the downside of 30 days?
Well, we're on a contract with Northwind as far as the milestones that we've asked them to meet, and if we delay that, we would have to extend the contract.
And what's the current milestone date, end date?
June 30th. And we were able to, the very final submission of the revised draft, so that's June 30th is for the report to come to us, and then we have to give it to SHPO, and of course SHPO can take a while to get back to us. That final submission of the revised draft to SHPO is on August 17th. Oh, I'm sorry, is that the day we're getting it back, Courtney? That's the day we're getting it back.
Right.
So it's really mid-July.
Mid-July is the date that this report has to be.
Well, we have July 2nd, but if you can get me everything back and from just the minimal edits that if we're talking about, I think those can be made quickly. But if we extend this, then we'd have to relook at the contract.
So we have until mid-July. A few minutes ago, I said a few days, so we have a few days.
Well, I'm sorry, I do need everything back by July 1st. But Commissioner Stoddard was asking about the 30-day extension, but
Okay, so we do have a couple of days. We have until July 1st to have all of our edits to Dr. C. Brandt so that the report, so that we don't have any problems with the timeline of this report. Are we comfortable with that? Can you get your edits in to Dr. C. Brandt? Commissioner Laramie saying yes. Commissioner Beck is good with the report as it is.
I don't know that I'm good, but I accept the report as it is.
She's accepting the report as it is.
I'll accept the report as it is with the one proviso that it's clear that the Clark County School District stopped cold the nomination of the other potentially historic structures. That just strikes me as just, so I'm all right with that, but just make sure that it's a Clark County School District and not some fly-by-night representative, that this is the Clark County School District doing this. So I'm okay with that.
So we'd like to make a motion, how we're going to proceed.
Chair?
Yes.
Is it, and someone needs to help me on protocol here, but would it be appropriate in approving this to make a statement that we want to in the future have the whole, we want to report on evaluation of all the buildings? Or expand it or something. I think we need to have something indicating that we're interested in seeing more buildings at that campus. on the National Register.
Madam Chair, so that, you could make that so that you're clear in your intent here, and you could also bring it up at future projects that you want as something for this board to consider, or as a future project for funding a broader report, scope, that kind of thing for a future project.
And it can also be in this motion?
You can mention it. It wouldn't be the action item here. My recommendation would be, and I'll look to my attorney, I think it's probably more appropriate for your last item for future agenda items, that be a subject for bringing up to have consideration for another project, a new project down the road.
So we should not put that in the motion for
I wouldn't put
today.
it in the motion. It can be mentioned as this is a
okay.
concern that we want to take a look at, but it wouldn't be a part of the motion itself. That would be a part of direction to staff to include on a future agenda as a part of that last item you have this afternoon.
So I'd like a motion.
Commissioner Laramie, I make a motion to approve the report with the suggested edits that were made here today and any revisions that might come through the commission in the next couple of days before the 1st of July, understanding that the commission will probably pursue some additional work on this property in the future.
May I have a second?
Excuse me, and are those edits for today to include the map? And
Yes.
to include the Clark County School District as the representative?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Beck, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? So it has been moved and properly second that we proceed with one objection. So it carries. Okay, our next item is HPC 78749. Discussion for possible action regarding comments and suggested edits for the intensive level architectural survey of motor court motels along Las Vegas Boulevard and Fremont Street. Report submitted by Northwind Resource Consulting. Dr. C. Brandt.
Diane Seibert for the record, and we are actually running quite short on time. We have to vacate the chambers at 2. So Courtney, with that in mind, I don't know if you can summarize this report quite succinctly and let whatever comments we have, if we can make quick comments.
Let's see. I think I probably can. Let's see, go through that.
Diane Seibert for the record as well. Everybody was, again, given the opportunity to read this. I sent it as a WeTransfer file, so I'm hoping that everybody was able to, I know it's a very long report, but if everybody was able to at least look it over and note their comments. I did ask for comments back, and I just did receive a few. So if I don't have anything other than that, if we have, make sure that people are reading the reports and get back to us so that we can address them here at the meetings. Thank you.
And Commissioner Beck, on page II, you have a summary section there of the 13 properties recommended eligible. I have a question. May I ask it at this time, or is that inappropriate? Nobody knows? Okay.
I guess.
So go for it. It may be in here, because I have to say I didn't read like the ARA forms and such, and I may have missed it, but I was interested in the criteria for properties that were not eligible. I know it had to do with alterations, but it was unclear to me. Is there a section in here that explains that?
Yes.
Okay, then I just missed it.
Okay, yes, let me see if I can find it specifically for you. It does discuss each property and how they were evaluated.
Yes.
As well as a summary of how they were evaluated and the results. So it is in there. If you have a question about a specific property and you're not finding that information in here, if you want to submit that comment to Dr. Seibert, and then I can make sure that that information is in the report.
Okay.
And when we go through this online, are you able to do a word find? Yes, okay, so you could find it really quickly.
Okay.
Chair, Sheila, for the record, what are we being asked to do today? Because I'm looking at the summary. First of all,
Provide feedback and suggested edits.
but we're not voting on accepting this report.
Feedback and suggested edits.
What's the contract with this one? When does that expire?
It's the same time, sorry, Diane Seibert for the record, it's the same time frame as the Las Vegas High School.
So are you saying we need to take action on this today as well?
Well, we need the final edits so that we can go back, that Northwinds can go back and make the edits in order to submit it to SHPO.
So Courtney, you may proceed.
Well, maybe, may I suggest that if there are any questions maybe instead of going through the presentation, what would be more helpful to the commission? Being able to ask me questions while I'm here, or skipping to the results, or what would be more helpful?
Because we are really short on time, and if we are going to suggest edits today, because you've already read this, there is a summary. Page 114 has one summary, and maybe we could look at that. Bob, I'm sure that you read every word of this.
I did, and was enjoyable. There was some great research.
Yes.
Tremendous. It's a document that's going to be usable for a very long time.
Yes.
I was simply asking, the document itself is fine with me, a couple of nickel and dime changes regarding maybe what was the first motel based on I think a report from from the museum. But I'm asking what would be the next step after this report? Are you actually recommending that we fund a nominations for some of these structures? What is the summary on page 114 or page 232? But I think it's 114.
Let me just get there. We are not recommending that nominations move forward. This was simply an informational document for the City of Las Vegas and the Commission. I would defer to staff to respond to that question about, what the next steps would be.
So, Madam Chair, that was what I was just conferring with Dr. Seabrandt on. So to your point, Vice Chair Stovall, while the last item does have a timetable because that item is going to SHPO so that we can have them do what they need to do so that we can update the National Registry form for that. This is informational for the city. Based on the report and the findings that are made here, you as a board and city staff will then determine what the next thing we do is. And so this one doesn't have that level of timeliness that was affected in the last discussion. So this item, the consultant piece is done at the end of the month after they make the edits based on conversation or anything that comes back. But this one is informational for us to then determine what a next step might be. There's no timeline because the next step hasn't been determined yet.
So, Mr. Summerfield, we're not, it says summary and recommendations. We are not if we accept this report, we're not accepting the recommendations.
Correct. You're just accepting that the research has been done, and then we'll use this as you said, we will, just a moment ago, substantial research, very good information in here that we will then use to determine what next steps might be.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Any comments, questions?
Commissioner Laramie?
Laramie?
I do have one question. So I know that in your findings, you say that a district is impossible, which I totally understand, and point out which properties might be eligible individually. I don't know a lot about multiple property nominations. Is that something that could be a potential option here as well? And if so, can we add that to the report?
Yeah, we can definitely add a little, like a summary of how that would be done and how, to be honest, I've never done one. I know they're really complicated, but we could definitely add something in the report that says this is an option and here's how it would be done and what it means.
Great, I have a couple other small comments that I think are just best sent to Diane. They're just very small revisions like typos and such.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
That's all I have.
I have one question. This is Commissioner Beck. So what we're discussing in terms of recommendations, is that to put something in about a multiple property nomination? Or
Yes, my thought is just, obviously, we're not making any decisions on how to move forward, but if that's an option, because I understand that sometimes those can be used in lieu of a district, when there are multiple properties that kind of all have the same context or something. Again, I don't know a lot about it, but if it is an option that we should consider in future conversations, then I think it should be added into the report under recommendations as a potential option.
So we have to vacate the room in 10 minutes. So I'd love to move ahead with this.
Can I do one quick question? We're only looking at properties that are eligible for the Las Vegas property register, is that correct?
And National Register.
But that would
We looked at
require
them for both.
the owners.
It doesn't require, but
Okay.
it is helpful.
I'm done.
Madam Chair, if I may, real quick, I do need to clarify, because I think I maybe created a misunderstanding. We've been asked to keep the meeting to 2 hours because there is something that's following us. I don't believe we have to be a hard out at 2, but we do need to move quickly through the remaining items on the agenda. And I apologize. I think when I spoke to Dr. Seabrandt earlier, I may have made it seem as if we had to be out at a hard 2. We were asked to keep it to 2 hours. There is something after us, but not necessarily right immediately at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. So could I have a motion?
Still up for the record, I'd like to accept item HPC 78749, the intensive level architectural survey of motor courts and motels along Las Vegas Boulevard and Fremont Street.
Commissioner Laramie, I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So it carries unanimously.
Commissioner Hartskus, is that a yes?
I vote aye.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. HPC 78526, discussion for possible action regarding award nominations for Historic Preservation Month, which is May 2020. Dr. Seabrandt.
Diane Seabrandt for the record. Were we going to put that in abeyance, Chairwoman?
Well, we can, but now we don't have a hard 2 o'clock, so how would you like to handle it?
Okay, so this is pretty quick, I think. For this, obviously, COVID-19 caused us to miss May for Historic Preservation Month. There are quite a few organizations that have been doing things online for Historic Preservation Month, or they did. The reason for this item is to ask if we wanted to hold the Historic Preservation Month later this year, or do we want to just try again next year in May, when it is the actual Historic Preservation Month?
So for the record, this is something we do during historic, but it's really a recognition of those who have made contributions to, and I think that it would, it's a positive thing, and we need some positive things this year, so I would suggest that we do one this year and we do one in May. So whether the timing up to the board or the doctor or staff is to when the soonest, we certainly want to do probably not in December or November, maybe October.
Diane Seaman for the record, that's fine, but the issue I have is nobody has sent me a nomination. So in order to have the nominations, do you have one?
Yes.
Fantastic. So I need people, if you feel that there is a project or a person or an event or something that is worthy of a Historic Preservation Nomination Award, please send it to me as soon as possible.
And I would suggest we do it in October. That's Nevada's birthday, October 31st, so we could tie it into that.
Okay, and October is actually National Archaeology Month as well, so it ties in well.
So it's perfect. So please get your nominations in. All of the categories are here in this report, so we should get these in as quickly as possible. Thank you. We don't have, there's no action, correct? So October, is October a good month? Can I have a
Well,
motion?
the action is to what months to change it
Right.
to.
So may I have a motion?
So moved that we hold the award ceremony in October. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Good, okay, good. No opposition. So October 2020 is our Historic Preservation Month for the year, and we are going to accept nominations until the end of
August.
August. The next item is HPC 78529. It's a discussion for possible action regarding updating the language on the Las Vegas Historic Preservation Commission Centennial Legacy Grant Program applications. So if you've had time to go through this, Dr. Seabrandt.
Well, I think staff was recommending that we obey this item until July so that we can have an in-depth discussion about it.
Okay?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just simply say, this is great. A tremendous amount of work was put into this, a couple of
Yes.
minor questions that I could even send to you, but this is really a solid update and look forward to the discussion. Well, I'll send you my comments in advance.
And I can do the same thing. I just have a couple of minor questions, but this is amazing work. So we're going to obey this item then? Okay, good.
Yes, ma'am. If you're comfortable with that, we would just ask that your agenda is looking, at least at the moment, in pretty good shape to be able to have a robust discussion, if necessary, on this for your July meeting. So if you could obey it to your July meeting, that would be helpful.
I'd like to make a motion to obey.
I second. Beck?
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Any
And that would
opposed?
be July 20, oh,
15.
July 15th is the next meeting,
thank you.
so it carries unanimously.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
I'm sorry?
Thank you.
And it was seconded by Jack. So I'm ready to move on. HPC 78530. Is that correct? Report by the Department of Planning regarding Director's update.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Historic Preservation Commission. Robert Summerfield, Director of Planning, for the record. So I just have a couple things. The first thing is I want to thank the members of the committee. I know not being able to meet for several months now, 3 months, has been stressful. I know there's a lot of work that we're engaged in collectively, and so I want to just thank everybody for their patience, continuing to work with our Historic Preservation Officer on some of these subjects and providing her the information. So first off, thank you for everyone's patience as the city has continued to work through this. The second thing is, unfortunately, we have had Sheila Collins resign from the Historic Preservation Commission. So her seat will now be open. We do have a couple interest forms. Actually, we think we have a couple well-qualified people that we will be looking at. However, we would like just to mention to the commission that if you know of anyone who's interested in historic preservation in the city of Las Vegas that meets the criteria established by Title 19 for membership on this board, we would encourage you to encourage them to complete a board interest form with the city clerk's office. That form is available online and can be completed there. We do expect, well, one, if we hear that there's anyone that's going to put in with some immediacy, we'll take a look at those nominations as well. But we hope to have someone that we can put to council to fill Ms. Collins' seat probably within the next 90 days, so that we'll have someone hopefully in the seat in time for a great October month when they can come on board and help nominate some worthy projects or people who've contributed to historic preservation efforts here in the city. So that's my report at this time. If there's any questions, please.
What was her specialty, or the seat?
I'm going to look to Dr. Sebring. I believe she was a at-large, meaning she was just general interest in historic preservation.
Great.
And Diane Seaborn, for the record, did we want to mention that Craig Polatis will be starting, he'll be here in July?
Yeah, my apologies, yes. So in addition to Ms. Collins' departure, we actually do have a previously vacated seat that will be filled. Council at their last meeting did ratify Mr. Palacio's nomination, and so he will be joining you all for your meeting in July.
Thank you. HPC 78531, report by the Department of Planning regarding our project update list.
Robert, do we have time for this? Sorry.
I'm sorry, Robert Summerfield, City of Las Vegas. I did not have anything to add to the project list at this time. I unfortunately have to get to another meeting, so it should just be the updates from the standard list at the...
Okay, I'm just going to, all right, Diane Seaborn for the record. I'm just going to go through these really quickly. I did have a PowerPoint presentation. There it is. So we did get the Centennial Commission funding, $75,000. SHPO grants, and I think Commissioner Laramie just left. I'll contact her separately. On the SHPO grants, we did get the conference grant, but it has been changed to online, and it's the new dates of August 2nd through the 9th. I'll confirm that with, I'm sorry, the August 3rd through the 9th. One of the participants was Commissioner Collins, so we do have an opening if somebody else would like to participate on the online conference. Just send me an email. The other SHPO grant, the survey grant, I'm working with Seth, our city attorney, on this one as far as the final product, and what it's going to be is a catalog of past surveys that have been done in or conducted throughout the city. In order, so some of the conversations we've had today, in order so we understand what surveys have been done, what surveys have not been done, and what is lacking and what needs to be filled. I'll have a better update on that next time when we have a bit more time. Floyd Lamb Park, we had an update this morning or this afternoon from the Director of Planning. I really don't have, well, I do. The things I had to add on that is the structural upgrades are in progress. The roof has been delayed. SHPO has not approved the roofing material, and we have been in negotiations with them. There was a recent meeting with the Cultural Commission where the roof was not approved. So we are going back and looking at the type of roofing product that SHPO will approve. So that one is still pending. Project Enchilada, there are a couple signs, there's now 3 signs completed from the original 5, and the others are still pending. Fremont Street Experience, the LED sign is done. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to drive by that and look at it. Home and History, there's a website there. They will be having their Home and History celebration in September, and hopefully everybody had a chance to watch the second part of the documentary series. And oh, I need my clicker. Okay, where am I pointing this? Why is this, oh, no, that is not me. It's okay. The only other thing I had was the Las Vegas High School, there we go. The Las Vegas High School visit that we had with a couple of the commissioners, kind of a moot point now since we've had the report. The purpose of that visit was to see the buildings in question. And the Blue Angel has been restored. March 12th is when she went up in her permanent location at Fremont, Charleston, and Eastern, and she is now protected by a fence and is standing. And the only other one update I had was The Victory Hotel was demolished on April 22nd because it was deemed as hazardous by code enforcement and the fire department. And those are, I'm sorry, that was really quick, but those are the updates I have if anybody has any questions.
Any quick questions?
Any quick questions?
Sold off for the record. Officially, publicly, is there any update on the Huntridge?
So there was, during the Cultural Commission meeting, the sale, final sale of the Huntridge is still pending. It's supposed to take place at the end of December, and the potential buyer has expressed interest in preserving the main part of the theater as is. And I know that there was some discussion about having it on the local register, but I don't think that any decision has been really made on that one.
Maybe when we get to the suggestions for the next agenda is the appropriate place, but as far as the city's historic register, what's the process to get something on the city's historic register?
Well, that's when whoever the owner is would have to apply.
So it's the owner, we can't unilaterally recommend that it be on the national register, or on the city's register.
On the local? I would actually look to the city attorney for that question.
Yeah, Seth Floyd for the record. So I've looked at this before, and I'm looking through the code provision on this now. I actually don't think it has to be recommended by the property owner, but I would probably want to talk to planning first, because they normally require a property owner's signature on all of their entitlement applications, and they would probably use the same for this. But I'll have to look through the code and see if the owner's signature is required to put something on the register. I know it's not required for districts, but I'm not sure about individual properties.
All right, thank you, thank you.
So thank you for that report. HPC 78532, report by the Department of Planning regarding historic and archaeological resources in the local media. So we can just, those are all listed there for your reading pleasure. And our last item, I believe, is HPC 78533, discussion regarding topics for future agenda items by the Historic Preservation Commission. Comments made during this portion of the agenda by individual commission members shall refer solely to proposals for future agenda items, and any discussion shall be limited to whether or not any such proposed items are within the purview of the commission, and whether such proposed items shall be placed on a future agenda. No discussion regarding the substance of any such proposed topic shall occur, and no action shall be taken regarding the proposal. Any items for?
Well, Diane Seaman for the record. So to come back to Commissioner Beck's point, you wanted to have a discussion about doing a survey at the Las Vegas High School, is that correct?
Well, I wanted a discussion to see about what kind of plan we could make to move forward on it. It's still so confusing.
Okay.
Sold off for the record, that was, I'd like to see, be a little more specific on whether it's an action plan to hire a firm to look at potential nominees for the historic register on the Las Vegas High School campus, is what I'd like to see. The second item I'd like to see would be a hearing and possible action on nominating the historic Huntridge Theater to the City of Las Vegas' historic register. Thank you.
And Mr. Stodal, Seth Floyd, Deputy City Attorney, I did find the answer to that question. So the application can actually be made by the city, but as part of the application form, it's actually a pretty detailed list of what must be in the form. Property owner consent is required. So while the city can do all the work, prepare the application, get it ready for approval, one of those documents that would need to be filed is a property owner consent. I don't know what that form looks like, but it requires property owner consent.
I would still like, for the record, a hearing on the topic and then go through the process. Thank you.
All right, I have an item. Once upon a time, there was, the first sheriff of Clark County was a gentleman named Sam Gay, and there's, I just passed out some documentation from the book, The First 100. There was a Gay Street that was actually taken out and removed when they put the 95 freeway across, and the new association called the Fabulous Neighborhood Association, which is the area north of Bonanza, which includes the Neon District, the Neon Museum, et cetera. They're proposing that the little street of Wilson Avenue from Las Vegas Boulevard till it jogs be renamed as Gay Street, and then there would be a corner of Gay Street and Las Vegas Boulevard, and right next to the Neon Museum, and as kind of a gateway to it, and to try to put some interest back into that neighborhood. So I passed out some documentation of that. The president of that neighborhood association would like to address the board next month, if we can put that on the agenda. And what he'd like is a motion from the HPC that we're supportive of that happening.
So for the record, a minor point, Sam was not the first sheriff.
It's not? Oh, that's what it says in the
Charles Corkill was the first sheriff. Sam Gay was the first elected sheriff.
Ah, sorry. Okay.
I'm Diane Seaborn for the record. Commissioner Levine, if somebody wants to present and get in front of this commission, can you please pass my information to them so that I can coordinate with them?
Yes.
Find out exactly what they would like to say and put them on the schedule.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right.
Any other items for a future agenda? All right, so our last item, citizens' participation. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. No subject may be acted upon by the commission unless that subject is on the agenda and is scheduled for action. If you wish to be heard, come forward and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion on any single subject will, as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed, may be limited. Hello?
Hi, my name is Daniel Roberts. I am president of the Huntridge Foundation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization recognized by the state of Nevada since 2012. Our mission is to preserve the architectural integrity, history, and culture of the Huntridge Theater and the surrounding community. I could have done this at the beginning of this meeting, but I just wanted to echo, I guess, the statement of Commissioner Stoddall. I would like to see, or we, I should say, would like to see the Huntridge Theater placed on the local historic registry. It already sits on the national and state registry. There's a lot of things happening with the Huntridge Theater right now that aren't incredibly publicly covered by the media and whatnot. And I'd love to see more light shed on that. I think that as much pressure as we can put on this action, the better it will be for not only the theater as a structure itself, but for the the future historic preservation of a very, very, very important landmark in Las Vegas. And I know that I've kind of been singing this song for quite a while now, whether you guys recall or not, but there is an opportunity for action. I think we need to take that opportunity now. There's a very kind of murky gray area of ownership of the theater right now, which was discussed. It has been put on record multiple times, both in this chamber as well as in other locations and formats. But the purchase, if the question is regarding who can nominate it or it has to be said by the owner, that needs to be kind of thought out or identified clearly, not so vaguely. Because right now it's a very vague question of who owns the theater. I do not know who owns the theater. I do know that the the developer, Jay Dapper, who is attempting to purchase this theater, he is in escrow. Is he in escrow with the former owners or current owners of the Mizrachi family, or is he in escrow with the city of Las Vegas? It seems to me, from my understanding, that the city of Las Vegas is directly involved in this purchase process, and if that is the case, then the city of Las Vegas could be identified as a current owner, and if that is the case, then the city of Las Vegas should recommend that the theater be placed on the local historic registry. It was stated in the state commission meeting, the CCHP meeting recently that the city would, it was proposed that the city would take over the oversight, the historic oversight of the property. Now, if the city's going to take over the oversight of the property, doesn't it just make sense that the city should also have it on their local registry? Also, we should make sure to identify where that funding would come from. The reason that the Hunters Theater is in the current state that it's in is for many, many reasons, but one of which is that the state of Nevada has essentially not done a very good job of oversight on that property. So I'd hate to see the exact same thing happen without the excuse of proximity, as the state of Nevada exists in Carson City more than in Las Vegas officially. So I think right now we have a really great opportunity to just maybe not rectify the past, but to learn from the mistakes that were made in the past, and we can move forward doing the right thing. So let's kind of figure all this out. Let's see everybody happy, and I think putting the Historic Hunters Theater on the local historic registry will only solidify all that, and it'll be good for everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
So we know that this is going to be an item coming up on the next meeting's agenda.
Excellent.
So, and this is a good time to let me remind everybody that the July meeting has been changed, as you know. The meeting is on Wednesday, July 15th at 9 o'clock in the morning. So please, everybody, make sure that that's on your schedule. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It will be on that agenda.
Okay. Cheers.
I have a question, Palancar, for the record. I have a question regarding the Huntridge. I don't know about, if you put it on the register for the historic preservation, is that going to tie the new owner's hands of what he can do and not do with the building?
Absolutely.
And to me, he's trying to make a living and he's going to be in that spot. And it's been a kind of an eyesore for the last couple of years with, transients sleeping around it, et cetera, illegal activities. So I just want to know if that's going to hold him up for making it into something really nice for the neighborhood, or are we going to have more problems because we've closed his hands from doing anything else?
Well, I can make a comment on that. I don't know if I can directly answer that question because I don't necessarily have that authority, but I guess I would say that the reason that, and I live in the neighborhood, so the Hunters Theater is part of my neighborhood, so I assure you I'm well aware of all the dilapidation and vagrancy and whatnot that occurs around the theater. But I would say that it's not so much that the historic designation would keep any future work from happening, but it's actually the lack of compliance to that. The existing historic designations from both the national and the state, the covenants specifically, have been they just have been ignored. They have not been adhered to, and if they were adhered to, then the Hunters Theater would be open, operational, and kept up to a certain occupational or occupiable standard. So I think that the more protections that we can put on this building, the idea is not to keep anybody from making a dollar, but it's to, you understand that the building's already historic, it's already been deemed important, and we want to make sure that, people understand what they're getting into.
So I appreciate that, and we're going to have this on the next agenda, so we can really discuss it at that point. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
So we're done. So this is, I'm adjourning the meeting.